Sorry I haven't posted anything in a bit. I have been very busy. But what I want to do is go over, look at my face. That's better. So go over some of the explorations that I've done over the years. Listen to my perspective at the time of what I was working on, and then add new findings. So this is from several years ago where I'm talking about the aesthetic impact. The aesthetic impact, aesthetic by definition is a pure emotional feeling or sensation, a pure emotion. That's what I'm looking for in the remote viewing experience. I am waiting for the mechanisms below the threshold of my awareness to produce an aesthetic as I'm experiencing this range of time and space, otherwise known as a target. So let me listen to where my mind was on this day in May of 2016.
Edward here from earviewer.com. I have another video for you. Again, I'm continuing along on my exploration of how I experience these specific points in time and space, how these inputs, as Ingo termed them, how these inputs are converted through our mental processing core into mental processes that we then experience. And those mental processes come above the threshold of awareness, and we then describe them. We are describing our own mental processes that are being
meaning this, and I go into this a little bit more, as we are experiencing some type of residue, input residue, as the input is moving, or per a theory that I have, that the input is moving in extreme speed and leaving a residue moving through the mental processes that are then converted from whatever language they exist in, whatever state they exist in, into a language of visual and idea conceptuals and raw data that we can understand in our experience of reality.
They're stimulated by an input that exists in some point in time and space in whatever state they exist in. I don't know, I can't comprehend at this point what state these inputs actually exist in. But what I am understanding at this point, and I believe until I prove otherwise to myself, that the remote viewing process, or what you see, is our ability to somehow acquire these points in time and space, somehow, and then we pull them, theoretically, through our mental processing realms, and these inputs are completely converted into mental processes that we then translate into words and concepts and ideas and shapes and all these other things. That's a complete conversion, but I am hoping to someday get a grasp of the state in which these inputs exist. And my pursuit is to, as these inputs stimulate these mental processes, and they have a specific quality to them that is distinctly different than a non-input stimulated process.
And they do. They have a type of code, some kind of resonant code that indicates that the inputs are being stimulated outside of my 5 sense awareness.
And that as the stimulated process becomes available, I am wanting to explore the process itself in an attempt to get closer to the actual input, or what I consider input residue, meaning that the input flashes through and the processes are then stimulated and we are dealing with the end result. But I'm hoping that inside of the processes themselves there could be some type of residual input residue. That's my theory, and I'm attempting to explore and find that.
What that residue would be, it could be as the input, if the input is some frequency that could be compared to light, then the residue will most likely be something in the neural nets as the if they're photonic, as they're flashing through. Now they must be smaller. As they're burning through the neural nets of the brain, the residue, it would be most likely a result of that flashing energy. In which there could be, there would be codes, encoded elements of the quote-unquote range of time and space, or quote-unquote target.
Experience it in some way. In going into this experience, again, I want to experience the process, and I also want to experience emotional processes that are being stimulated. That if there is something emotional at this specific point in time and space, I want to attempt to experience it as well. Ingo Swann, in his work, along with Hal Puthoff, of back engineering Ingo Swann's experience of acquiring a point in time and space and attempting to describe how he was experiencing it, and they put it into a process and they call it controlled remote viewing, or CRV.
My kitty making a guest appearance.
But along that journey, he found that he had an emotional reaction to the point in time and space that he was being asked to describe. He put a label on it. He called it an aesthetic impact. And what does that mean? It's a word or a phrase that's thrown around quite a bit, and when you say it, you tend to sound like you know what you're talking about, even if you don't know what you're talking about. But if we look at the term aesthetic, by definition, is dealing with a pure emotional sensation, as opposed to an intellectual interpretation of it. So
that's the key, because as the input is flashing and stimulating, the aesthetic is taking place beyond the threshold of awareness. So exactly what that aesthetic is what I, as the viewer, am waiting to experience. So somewhere in here, an aesthetic is triggered by the input of this range of time and space, and I'm having a pure emotional sensation or reaction to it. And in the session, I'm waiting for that emotion to then become available to my awareness of how I'm feeling about it. That's the importance of the aesthetic. It's vitally important. It's extremely, extremely important to the process.
So it's a pure emotional sensation. Typically, it tends to be in regards to beauty, where we're reacting to something of beauty. But as we know in remote viewing, that is not always the case. We're reacting, it's a pure emotional reaction, a sensation to something. It could be negative, it could be positive. And impact is the force of one of the definitions of impact is the force of a new idea, or the effect or the influence of a new idea and its impact. So you can combine those two words together and you can get a better understanding of what Ingo was trying to convey in this concept of this part of his experience. And he labeled it an aesthetic impact. And going into this experience, I was opening myself to that as well, to experience the process of an aesthetic impact of the actual input itself, this specific point in time and space. The target, or the point in time and space, was an American Indian.
This is the core of my exploratory work, and what I want to leave behind or have available is this core work, which is extremely important to me to put out. This narrative of understanding and experience of the process of acquiring inputs from ranges of time and space. So that's it for this video. I'll pick another one that I have over 100 of these. I probably have about 150 videos that I've made. They're available online, all for free, where I'm exploring the process, which to me is more important than the data of remote viewing. Well, it just depends on. It just depends. We've been doing with crypto viewing. We do a lot of very important work. A lot of my projects are extremely important too. This process is of extreme importance to me personally, to make sure that I am putting this out there into the world, into the narrative, per what I need to be doing. So that's it for this one. I hope you find this interesting. Again, I'm sorry for not putting out more videos last month. I was extremely busy, but I'm refocused now that the weather has cooled off. I can kind of get refocused now, and many more to come.